Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with 8 players that could be surprise first round picks in this upcoming 2024 draft class, which happens tomorrow. If you're excited for the first round of the NFL draft, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. I will be going through every single draft pick at some point eventually on this channel. And now with the intro out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to get started. So we're going to start with 2 Michigan players. When I was formulating this list, I didn't want to pick guys where it would be surprising if they went in the first round to me, but that would actually surprise people. In other words, not the guys that I'm low on, but guys that I think maybe I'm high on or I'm with the consensus on that could end up going into the first round, whether that's positional need or fit, or there's just a run on these players and one team has him graded higher than everybody else. And the other thing that went into this was that I wanted to include players who were not inside my top 50 big board video, so I can kind of cover all of my bases and hope that between the 58 people I'm going to talk about, that all of them go within the first 32 picks of the first round. And I am kind of cheating here a little bit. Chris Jenkins was my number 51 player on my big board. He was just outside the top 50. And he is also someone who I could definitely see going in the first round. If Byron Murphy ends up going 9 to the Bears, which there's been a lot of smoke about that recently, and I don't really know what the Bears would gain from putting out smokescreen smoke at, the day before the draft on your second first round pick in the top 10. So I do think that there's a little bit of truth to that. So if that happens, I think a team in maybe somewhere between 10 and 20 will go ahead and draft Johnny Newton because they're like, okay, I think there's going to be maybe a run on D tackles here. And then all of a sudden Chris Jenkins is the next guy up in terms of interior penetrator type of guys. And obviously the Ravens, the Seahawks, the Chargers at the top of the second round, and maybe a trade up scenario are all teams that would be interested in him. They've got that Michigan / Baltimore Ravens tree thing going on, but I don't think he just fits in that scheme. I think he could be a true 3 technique at the next level and really be a good fit in any scheme. Roman Wilson, on the other hand, you could make an argument that he is slot receiver 2. He's slot receiver 3 for me. You could also make an argument that he's a Z and not a slot, which I don't know about that. But I think his future in the NFL predominantly is in the slot. However, right after the Senior Bowl, you started to see him get some hype into the back end of the first round. And then afterwards, the hype kind of fell off. He didn't run like people was expecting him to run. Now, I always kind of felt like he was a high 4.3 guy rather than like a low 4.3 pushing 4.2, especially when he added 15 pounds of muscle heading into this past season. But he is still a deep threat. He is someone who can take the top off the defense. And he's also someone who I think has upside as a potential wide receiver too. I think he's probably more likely to end up as a wide receiver 3, but like a high-end wide receiver 3, kind of like a Tyler Boyd almost. Now, I don't know if he's going to be as good as Tyler Boyd, but that sort of a role is where I would see him. And I could see Seattle, if they trade back, really liking Roman Wilson. I could see the Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs really like Roman Wilson. Now the Bills have Khalil Shakir, so probably not going to go after Roman Wilson in round 1, but I do think that they would have him graded higher than other teams. The Chiefs, if they decide that at this point they just kind of want speed, and more speed on offense, which is a good idea, Roman Wilson is definitely someone that I could see them targeting. But the most likely spot for him, I think, would actually be the San Francisco 49ers. I think if Brandon Ayuk ends up traded, which is not very likely. I don't think Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins gets traded. But if Brandon Ayuk does get traded, I could see them drafting Roman Wilson to be his replacement. Up next is Troy Franklin. I think this is a guy that a lot of people had the same sort of arc that I did for him. He is someone who early on I was bouncing around between a top 40 and a top 50 grade because that's kind of what the tape says. Then he went to the combine and ran low to mid 4.4. And when your entire game is predicated on you getting behind the defense, running mid to low 4.4s is not a good thing for your draft stock. However, I do think that there are going to be teams that have him maybe as high as wide receiver 5 in this draft class. And specifically, if a team like the Cardinals were to trade back out of 4 and fall out of range for those top 3 wide receivers, I could see them with their second first-round pick taking Troy Franklin because I think that's a team that would really like Troy Franklin. I also think Kansas City, if they were looking for a more traditional Z rather than someone like Marquise Brown, who also can play in the slot, they could be a team that could really like him. Again, Buffalo is another team that could really like him as well. But overall, I see him more as a complementary piece, like a wide receiver 2. I do think he has that sort of upside. But if he's going to be a wide receiver 1, he really needs to learn how to play through contact better. And the frame is something that concerns me. Devonta Smith is one of one. I don't really think you can use Devonta Smith to justify a 6'1", 175-pound wide receiver going in the first round because he's one of one. And Troy Franklin is not as good as him as a prospect. I don't even think they're anywhere near each other. And the other wide receivers that you've seen succeed at that weight were all under 5'10". Like the kid out of Houston that the Texans drafted, Nathaniel Dell, Tank Dell. He was really good last year until he got hurt. But he was like 173 pounds, I think, when he came out. But he's also like 5'8", okay? So if he was 5'8" and ran sub 4.3, then I could see him going in the first round because it's like, oh, okay, cool. You're not going to ask him to do some of the things that you're going to ask a 6'1" wide receiver to do, especially in a Z sort of role, which is what his position is going to be at the next level. Up next, I have another Oregon player, Kyrie Jackson. There are not a whole lot of press man corners, and you can make the argument, which is where I would have him graded if I was grading like for a press man team, that he would be CB2, even though I have a top 75 grade on him. But he is someone that I think, purely because of scheme fit and the fact that there aren't a lot of corners that look like him in this draft class, I could see him getting pushed up the board for a lot of people. In real life, I think he goes early second round, but it would not surprise me all that much, even though it would be a surprising pick, if a team like Kansas City, who traded Ladarius Sneed this year, would draft him, not only because of scheme fit, but also need. And contrary to popular belief, there is not a team in the NFL that drafts the best player available. Also, speaking of teams that don't do that, I would not put it past the Detroit Lions, assuming Terrion Arnold is off the board by 29, to draft Kyrie Jackson in the first round, because he is a brilliant scheme fit for them, and B, they desperately need a corner. They don't have a CB1 on their roster, and I'm not positive they have a CB2 on their roster either. I don't want to hear shit about Carlton Davis in the comments. Nothing. I'm not having it. Carlton Davis has never once in his career been a CB1. He's had Jamal Dean basically his entire career, and he's also gotten worse each of the past 3 years and has never played in a press or man-heavy scheme before. So we have no idea what Carlton Davis is going to look like. and I'm not particularly confident that it's going to be good. Up next is Patrick Paul, who is a elite physical tools sort of prospect. But he is a project, make no mistake about it. He's a tremendously high upside project. Like, if you look at him physically, he looks like a franchise left tackle. He looks like a Pro Bowl left tackle. Like, he's a tremendous physical specimen. He really just is. And even though I have him outside of my top 10 tackles video, or part of the top 10 at every position video, he was outside of my top 10. I don't even think he was number 11. I think he's 12, but I still have a top 75 grade on him because that's how good this offensive tackle class is, especially on the first 2 days. I could see a plethora of teams wanting to draft him from 20 to 32, especially if there is a run on offensive tackles and we're starting to talk about like tackle 6 or 7 by the time we get there, which is not an impossibility, but I would consider it unlikely. Next guy on the list is my safety too, actually, in Kalen Bullock out of USC. I think he was pretty much the only USC defender that was actually worth a damn last year. He was also the only one who did what he was told to do. So I think those two things may, in fact, have something in common. Nevertheless, it does appear that most teams in the NFL, at least from the information that is available to the public, which I'm sure 75 to 80% of is smokescreen smoke, but it seems like a lot of NFL teams, if not most of them, think Kalen Bullock is going to end up as a corner. And I can kind of see it, but he is 6'3", like 200 pounds. So, like, I get it, especially if you're trying to make a press man corner in this class because there aren't a lot of them. But I would caution against that because you're taking a guy who I think might have, like, borderline Pro Bowl to Pro Bowl upside as a safety and making him a corner. And I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm also not the one that's going to be coaching him how to play corner. So if it was someone who has had a track record of doing this or is just a really, really good corner coach, then like maybe New England, then maybe I would feel more confident in it, depending upon where he goes. But I would just keep him at safety because this isn't a very good safety class either, and I really like him as a downhill sort of safety who can also play some cover 2 or in the back end a little bit. So I really like Kalen Bullock. I think I'm higher on him than most people. I don't think most people have a top 50 grade on him. I could be wrong. I haven't particularly checked, but I really like Kalen Bullock, and it would not surprise me if Tyler Nubin maybe goes earlier than expected and then somebody's got to take a safety, or another one of those press man teams decides that they want to take Kalen Bullock and convert him to corner. Up next, we have Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I'm not high on him like a lot of other people are, but I also have him graded as a Z, not a slot receiver, which is also something that a lot of people have fallen into. I think he could play in the slot if you asked him to, but he's like 6'1" and 200 pounds. He can play on the outside, and he's also really good at it. I just question the actual tangible upside of him on the outside. Like, I think he's going to be good. Like, I think he's going to be solid. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to come in and have 800 yards and 6 touchdowns as a rookie. But then in year 4, he's going to be like an 800-yard and 6 touchdown kind of guy. I think he's just going to come into the league and be what he is, which is a reliable, maybe middle-of-the-pack wide receiver 2 or a high-end wide receiver 3 who's just very consistent. But there are several teams that are very high on Ricky Pearsall. I think it was Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network who said that at least one team has him graded as high as wide receiver 5 in this draft class. So it would not shock me again if one of those late first-round kind of guys, Buffalo, Kansas City, maybe even potentially Baltimore, were to go after him because they like him and they like the fit. And also, I think they're going to get not only instant production, but a very high floor player, in my opinion. I also think me having a top 100 grade on him is probably a little low. I don't really necessarily think he should be a top 100 sort of guy. He probably should be higher than that. I may be pushing him down the board simply because there's so many wide receivers that are so good, and I'm comparing him to them, that I'm not comparing him to like an objective standard. So I admit I might be a little bit low on Ricky Pearsall. And depending upon where he gets drafted, I might be a bit low on Ricky Pearsall. Last guy on this list is Ben Sinnott. I think he has sort of shifted into being the tight end 2 of this class for most people. Now, I have a 4th round grade on him, but I really should have gone back and looked at tight ends before, because there's not a lot of very good tight ends in this class, and I haven't really gone back and looked at them. Like, I've gone back and looked at wide receivers and thought about it and stuff like that. Same thing with offensive linemen, although I made that list and then it's effectively stayed the same. And I like just did the defensive guys, so I don't really think my opinion on them has changed all that much. But tight ends was the second position I did besides quarterbacks, and I kind of did it second because I didn't want to do it. So I was just like, okay, we'll watch tight ends. They all suck. We already knew this. Tight end is the weakest position in this draft class. And Ben Sinnott, admittedly, getting pushed into the first round does very much feel like somebody's trying to make a tight end because they're not going to get Brock Bowers. And it wouldn't surprise me if a team were to take him because he is a good athlete and he does block very well. But I don't really see, like, I don't even see Trey McBride upside. I had the top 50 grade on Trey McBride. So Ben Sinnott, 4th round grade is probably low on him, especially post combine, but I haven't really gone back and updated my rankings. So probably would end up either higher top 100 or lower top 75 for me now, and I don't know where that would put him. I think that would move him to like 4, as opposed to, I think he's 6 right now, 3 or 4, I don't remember. But in my notes, I wrote down decent athlete, not like as his RAS score would suggest an elite level athlete, mainly because I don't think he's an elite level athlete, but that doesn't matter. I have problems with RAS as a metric. I think I've mentioned it before. One day I may or may not make a video talking about it. I mean, I don't really think I could because it's like a 3-minute conversation where I talk about it. But it could be part of a video where I talk about all the shit that I don't want to talk about. Maybe a video talking about how I scout or something like that. I might mention RAS. I don't know. But Ben Sinnott has an elite caliber RAS. I think he's like 99.99, honestly. Like, I think he's like one of the 10 best athletes at the tight end position ever, according to RAS and all that. So, I don't know. But I think I'm probably admittedly a little bit low on him. I think I probably, if I at some point this summer decide to go back and watch more film on the tight ends, which I may or may not do. I may just let it lie. But if I do, I will probably bump him up at least a tier, maybe 2. And unfortunately, that is all that I have for you today. A little bit of a quicker video. That's mainly because I got called into work. But it's at this point that I would like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now, with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.